So on that topic, a highly educated man, Dr. Jock Allison, is with me. Are you still in Dunedin, Jock? Good morning.
Yeah. Greetings.
Greetings to you. We met some years ago, a long time ago, when we both had an interest in cricket, but we'll let that slide by for now. Tell me, Jock, you've made a submission to the Select Committee. What was the thrust in it? Was it purely scientifically based, that what the government is trying to tell us is not scientifically sound?
Well, that was my first point. I said government policy, and I wrote a summary because it's quite long. Government policy re climate change, global warming is professed to be based on science. It isn't.
So tell us why the science is wrong, in your opinion, Jock.
Well, first of all, on the greenhouse gas side, methane and nitrous oxide, about supposedly half of our emissions, of which we seem to be wanting to pay billions and billions, are only account for about 1% of the warmth in the world, or the greenhouse gas effect.
For the greenhouse gas effect.
Greenhouse gas.
Right, so tell me about water vapour. How is that formed?
Well, I mean, there's water vapour in the air all the time. I mean, the IPCC make its assessments of dry air. There's no such thing. There's normally, 10 to 15,000 parts per million of the air is water vapour.
So what's your background as a scientist, Doc? Because I knew you at Invermay, you were a director out there, you're an agricultural scientist. So are you qualified to talk about these matters in terms of the percentage of various greenhouse gases in the atmosphere?
I've been studying greenhouse gas for more than 10 years, so yes, I am. I mean, that's one of the sorts of arguments that always comes up. I mean, what is a climate scientist? I mean, all the stuff's based on computer modelers who take assumptions. I mean, they're very good at maths and running large computers. They wouldn't know anything about, many of them, about biological systems at all. So how's that for a backhander back again?
I'm not questioning you in the slightest. You are an eminently qualified scientist. I'm just saying, so what was, when you made this submission to the Select Committee, did their eyes appear to be glazing over as you gave them what you believe to be very strong scientific evidence that they were wrong? No, they weren't glazing over, but I wrote a very short summary and I finished off by saying that the government-paid scientists refuse to debate all these things. I mean, global warming, or climate change, or whatever you like to call it, is government policy. And it's government policy throughout the world. They've virtually all signed up to Paris 2015. And when you get government paying all of the education sector, that's primary, secondary, tertiary, government pays all the government departments. I mean, the Ministry for the Environment advised them. Their scientific capability is relatively small. They pay all the scientists and the universities and research institutions, and they pay most of the research grants. So as for the rest of the world, if anybody disagrees with all of this mantra, you lose your job. It's simple as that. So did you lose your job back in the 1980s with the government as a consequence of your views even back in those times? No, I resigned in 1986 after I'd been Director of Agriculture for the Southern South Island for 8 years and went into the private sector. So there was nothing to do with the political ideology that might have been pushed around by your bosses at the time. No. Well, I remember as a research director going to meetings in Auckland. That'd be about 1980, 81. We were going to run out of oil by 2000. Yeah, so therein lies a bit of an issue, I would have thought, with the credibility of all the predictions, in that they have been making the doom and gloom predictions since about the mid-1970s, maybe even earlier. Not too many of them have come to pass, have they? No, it's 100% fail thus far. So
week or so, a number of eminently qualified scientists, yourself amongst them. And you all seem to be of a certain generation in that you are emeritus professors, semi-retired, in your 60s and 70s. Why is there no voice coming from a younger generation trying to tell this story?
Well, there virtually aren't very many of them who aren't employed by the state. There are a few quite significant people in the advisory, but not many of them. There are very few climate realists, we like to call ourselves. You made a comment earlier, Peter, about the 10, 25 and 80 metres. I mean, this is absolute nonsense. The sea level's rising in New Zealand is 1.7 millimetres per annum. It's about 2 millimetres per annum in Auckland, average. But, I mean, in New Zealand, where we have earth, you can be shot up or down by many times that in an instant. So why are we worrying about this? And if you take 1.7 millimetres per average, the average for New Zealand, that's not very much if you times that by 100 in the next century.
I know there's some quite absurd fantasies being published, and I just don't know how people can get away with it. So, Jock, what's your attitude to A, the Prime Minister speaking at the United Nations in the next couple of days, and then B, this big planned nationwide march, protest march, rally, whatever you want to call it, scheduled for Friday?
Well, everybody's been indoctrinated, Peter. All these school people, children marching, don't know anything about the science. I've been asked to speak at a couple of schools in the past in Dunedin. It's quite nice to go along and talk to school kids and various other people. And if you go to some of these sorts of things at the Dunedin City Council, talk to some of these young people in the Greens, they know absolutely nothing about climate change.
Exactly.
But they're just going along with the sway. Yeah.
So you just think it's a real question of groupthink. Tell me about when you go to the...
Absolutely. There's a very good publication called Groupthink. Just Google it, and it's by Christopher Booker. The whole science of climate change and how it's developed.
So tell me about what the reaction is when you go and talk to school children in Dunedin, Jock. Do they understand what you're... Do they have a different thought process as a consequence of what you've taught?
Well, it's quite nice talking to fourth formers, really. I mean, they're very interested in what you have to say. Very good discussions.
Do they question your theory compared to what they have been taught before?
Yeah, they ask a few questions. Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Do you think that you would convince them?
I think I convinced some of them. I mean, you couldn't think you would convince them all. Particularly where we've got to today. I mean, nonsensical.
Now, there's a couple of statements made about people like you by those on the other side of this argument. One is, he's just in the pay of the fossil fuel industry, and the other one is, he's just an old, or particularly a conservative man with right-wing views, and he's never going to want to know about climate change anyway. His mind is closed. So I'll put these thoughts to you, Jock. Are you in the pay of the fossil fuel industry at all?
I wish. Not a cent.
Any right-wing think tanks have got to you at all to publish material?
I've been to a conference or two, but I mean that's totally insulting. I mean, we look at the science, and if it's warming, we agree, and we agree with global warming. There has been some, and we look at the causes and assess the data accordingly. I mean, there's a very good group from ex-NASA in the US, astronauts, as the engineers, physicists, the works, and they call themselves the right climate stuff. And these are older guys, but unbelievably capable guys, who have gone through all of the science over quite a long time,
unpaid, and they conclude, as to many others, that CO2 has got very little to do with warming.
You and the gentleman named Thomas Sheehan published a paper. I've got a copy of it in front of me. Greenhouse gas is a more realistic view. Yep. Now, this is a scientific document written for scientists. Has it been peer reviewed?
Not the way the journals do it, but it was overlooked by Will Happer, who was at that time scientific advisor and one of the premier scientists in the US. And I make a comment about peer review in the climate science area. It's sort of keeping the nest warm. It's a power review, and it's very difficult to get alternative reviews published. But in fact, there have been a few papers published recently which say carbon dioxide is a short-term gas. It doesn't last in the atmosphere very long. When in fact, our pals here and the IPCC say it lasts for thousands of years. It's absolute nonsense.
So whereabouts was your paper, Greenhouse Gases, a more realistic view? Where was that published?
The New Zealand Institute of Primary Industry Management Journal. It's what used to be the Farm Management Society. Yeah.
So that is a reasonably recent publication, is it?
Yes, last year. Yep.
And how much pushback was there against that? Was there any comment made on what you might call the mainstream media about it?
It's been summarised in the Farmers Weekly. Little comment. Nothing published in the New Zealand Farmers Weekly, which refuses to publish anything against the climate change mantra. A little bit in newspapers, but most of the newspapers are very reticent about publishing anything against the climate science mantra.
So, why would people not listen to a guy like yourself, Jock? I mean, I've heard of you for years and years and years from your previous job out of Invermay.
Yep.
You are a man, I would have thought, with great respect, particularly in the agricultural science field, which is not disconnected, of course, to what we're talking about here because of the planned attack, it would seem, on sheep and cows in this country. Why does a guy like yourself not get listened to?
Well, there are a hell of a lot in the farming sector do listen to me. I haven't written much in the paper lately in terms of letters, but I used to write quite a lot of letters. And it's quite staggering the number of people that come up to you at airports and things and think, that's great stuff, we really agree, keep going. So there's a great deal of people do agree with what I'm saying and disagree with the mantra.
So it's become a highly politicised argument, hasn't it? We're very aware of that now. Now, I understand your daughter's Catherine Rich, isn't it, who used to be a National Party MP. Are you therefore looked upon as somebody with right-leaning political views and therefore you're not relevant to the public discussion on this?
I'm certainly, I guess, looked on as being a bit right-wing, but I mean, it's not a matter of which wing you're on. I mean, really, look at the data. I mean, I've put in the paper many times, if anybody could point me to any research which shows that CO2 is the climate control knob of climate, please point me to it. In fact, the New Zealand Climate Science Coalition wrote to the Royal Society of New Zealand, wrote to the IPCC Secretariat, has asked Professor Renwick, who's very valuable in Victoria, you'll have heard of him.
Indeed.
Where is the information which says CO2 is the driver of warming in the climate? And there's a bit of hand waving and they refer to something, a few hundred pages in the IPCC, nothing ever specific. The Royal Society can't provide the information and they advise the government. The IPCC can't either. They're keeping this thing going.
Well, didn't the IPCC write back in 1995 in their assessment report, the second one, AR2,
yep.
The line, long-term prediction of future climate states is not possible? Didn't they write that themselves?
Yes, they did, and I think that was a report. That was the second one. That was
AR2,
where the after everything was agreed, that a gentleman called Ben Santa threw a whole lot of the stuff out that had been agreed and said there was some indication that humans caused warming, which wasn't what was agreed. I mean, there's been nothing convincing at all in any IPCC report that CO2 is involved. But we get the situation now, and we get Jenny Lawrence as one of them from the group in Wellington, where every weather event is due to climate change. I mean, natural variation has disappeared as a cause of anything.
I think I've heard somebody say it's a bit hard to forecast the weather 3 days in advance, let alone 30, 50 years in advance.
Well, I mean, the assumption is that it's going to keep warming forever. Well, the indications are that it's not. And with various sunspots, etc., we could be going to a cooling phase sometime. The fact is, we simply don't know what the timing is. We're operating in a total pinprick of geological time, and to confidently predict things like we are and waste many billions of dollars. And going back to the PM you asked me about right at the beginning, I think it's absolute nonsense talking to this. That's the UN about climate change. She, like most of them, doesn't know anything about it.
But she's going to take a lot of money off us to prove that she does.
Well, Ian Harrison of Tail Risk Economics, in one of the submissions to the Select Committee, referred to this to 2050 as a $200 billion vanity project. Changing CO2 levels will make almost have no effect on climate. But $200 billion, it's a big figure, would be about $3,000 per household per annum till 2050. Now, the Australian election was won and lost on Shorten not saying what their climate policies were going to cost, and we haven't been told here either. But if we are told, I don't think the public will be that impressed. No matter how much marketing they do, $20,000 per household is a big figure.
Well, that figure for meeting our obligations under the Paris Accord is $14 billion over 10 years, so $1.4 billion a year, taken from the New Zealand taxpayer to go to the United Nations for what? We don't know. But that in itself is a big enough financial penalty in the short term, let alone what's going to happen after that.
There are two estimates, 14 to 30. Yeah.
It's frightening, isn't it? Jock Allison.
It's just nonsense.
Yeah. I thank you for your time this morning, and I wish you well with your submission. I hope that somebody listens to it. I know that other submitters giving the kind of information that you are know that they are just not being listened to. But frankly, with what's going on in this country at the moment, I think we just have to keep up the fight, keep up the discussion, keep on pushing out the other information as opposed to the blatant propaganda down from way too much of the mainstream media at the moment.